Good afternoon, ladies and gentlefolk of the YouTube persuasion. I am your host, Demon Soul Catcher. I'm here to walk you through some of the tools that come with the Counterspell build mode. These are useful for building up custom maps to upload on the workshop, and all in all, you can achieve some pretty interesting effects. So, let me actually get into the main menu and let me hit escape real quick to show you something that I find very useful for myself. You go into your options, and down here, you actually see the show weapon tab. What happens is I have it unchecked right now, so I do not see my weapon. And since I play as the warrior, it's the sword and the shield. Because if you're building and you're trying to look down to get the correct orientation of some items, the shield can actually hinder your view of it. So I like to keep that hidden so I don't actually see it. With the mages and all like that, where you have a staff, it's not as bad. So let me hit escape again and we'll go into our build mode. Now, if you notice, it generated a island terrain with random trees. This is because of this current build. What happens is that it just randomly generates an island and trees and all. So let me hit enter first and I'll show you. Down here in the bottom left, you actually have some basic information that pops up. By default, your world size is 96 by 96 by 32. And what it amounts to is each chunk is broken down into a 32 block by 32 block by 32 block. Hold on a second. So if you wanted to make a really small map, the smallest one you could make is a 32 by 32 by 32, which is one chunk. And that is very small. It's really not useful in a sense because of the fact that it's so small. Everything is usually larger because it really comes in handy for that. Alright, now let me escape so I can get my mouse back. Now up here, you have your mini map. I'm sure many of y'all already know about this. And your grid pattern is your chunks, obviously. Down here in the bottom right, you have your texture, and I'll show you how to change all that in a minute. Up here, you have your coordinates of your cursor, or your cube block, whichever you wish to call it. And you have your tool selected, and it changes obviously based on which tool you have. And by default, you start off on the cube tool, which is your first tool, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then you have paint mode, which is normal, and if you press P, you go to paint, fill, and then back to normal. Paint or normal is actually just you placing the blocks like that. Paint actually allows you to basically paint over that texture with a different texture. With the fill tool, I'm not 100% sure what exactly that does because I don't know everything about the build mode. I just know enough to actually produce some interesting maps myself. And we do have an undo feature, which is, in my opinion, very crucial. And as always, it's just Control Z and Control Shift Z, as always, is your redo. But you hit escape and you see this. At this current build, because I'm sure some things may or may not exist in later builds as the developer changes up things and all. But as you can see right here, we have a bunch of maps that I've been working on. Right here, you have a find lobby. If you're playing or if you're connected to the internet and you want to connect into one of your friends, you can do that. Or you can create a lobby, basically playing online, allowing people to join in, doing your friends only or a public lobby. And underneath it, you have publish, which obviously is just publishing your map to the workshop. You do have the exit build mode, which obviously we don't need that, and the menu, that just gives you access to your standard menu right here. But let me pull up this back, because say I wanted to bring up this, obviously you just click on it, load it. You can even just type in the name. Down here is obviously how you save it, but let's generate a new map, and I'll show you some of the options. Obviously it's going to ask if you want to ask if you're sure about creating a new map. We are, so we click OK. Here is how you adjust the size of the map. You can always make this bigger, but one thing is it has to be on a base of 32. So you couldn't just put 20 in the depth. It has to be 32. As I said, with this current build, these are the 4 options that we have right now. I'll show you a mountain real quick. Let's take off the forest so we can actually. Oh no, let's leave it. So let's create a forest in the mountain, and as you see, the spawn point needs to be moved. But for right now, let's actually check out this forest on this mountain, which, all in all, this is pretty nice. So the random generated map is obviously very useful for a quick map if you don't want all the go straight into the details with the flatland, which I'll actually get to and show you in a minute. Obviously, you can take off the trees, and you can actually even have the map generated without the trees and the grass. So let me go back to the new map. Obviously, we don't want to say that. And we'll go with the flat, and we'll take off the grass and the forest. For those of you who've built, or at least tried it, this will look very familiar because this is actually what used to be the default map whenever you started a map. And personally, I like having this for a lot of things because it gives me that control over everything. I don't have to worry about flattening everything out to get started, and I don't have to worry about doing everything. And I'm going to show you something. The console command. Now we hit the slash, which is also the question mark key, and let's type in SETTERRAIN. Hit our space, and we'll put in. Let's put in 9. And if you notice, our terrain actually rose up off the ground because it's set higher than the default level. And I did that to show you the next one, which is AUTOTERRAIN. And all it did was actually just kind of, apparently all I wanted to do was change the corner. But your AUTOTERRAIN, whenever that console command actually works, it generates the terrain randomly, like the starter map or the, well, basically, yeah, like the starter map or the automatic features. And with console commands, you cannot actually undo them. But since we just did a simple SETTERRAIN, we can always undo that by doing SETTERRAIN and adjust it to about where it was actually supposed to be, which I think was, no, it wasn't 7, it must have been 8. Yep, and as you can see, it's now flat, and our water is just a little below the level of that. But let's actually get started and moving on to our tools. First of which will actually be showing you how to change out textures. And start over here in this corner because why not, right? Alright, to change the texture, you press tab and it opens up this. You have your different things right here. Currently, the newer things they've put in has actually been the larger doors. These are one of the more newer items, which, if you notice, it's just a much larger door than what used to be. So, building up a nice castle or something, you can always use those larger doors. Then you have your decals, which some minor details. Lights are all your objects that generate light. Shapes, 3D objects, and all of that. And if you notice, you have your tree parts because you can actually create a tree manually instead of having it generate. Which you have dead trees, you have cherry blossom tree, you even have a small tree. But I'll show you a command later and how to actually place and build up the trees and all like that. But I'll get into that a little bit later. And over here, as you see, it gives you some basic tools or basic key presses to actually access your tools, different lightings and all like that. Now, the cube's your standard cube. It's just going to be a block. So all you players of Minecraft, that's right, there's the Minecraft block. Now, if you press your I, it increases it in your height. If you press L, it's your length. And if you notice, whenever I look down like this, the orientation kind of changes a bit. So if you want to build up a floor, you just press I and L until you get up a nice size. Let me go like that. And you have a little bit of a floor. And if you look up like this, you can use the same methodology to actually just build up a little wall. And just like that, we have a corner. Now, let me actually decrease it so I can actually see a bit more on the sides. Now, and you do need a mouse with a scroller in it, because you scroll your wheel up and down, and that actually is what pushes it closer or farther away from you. And underneath the JK and L, you have your comma and period keys, and that is actually what makes it deeper. So we make it too deep like this, and as you see, we have a solid block. It's just a lot bigger than a single block, and it's a little bit quicker than having to do a bunch of blocks. But again, you just figure out a good way. You go for it and build whatever you can dream up. If you play with friends, I mean, hey, more power to you, because you can get a lot more done with friends, but you gotta watch them. They might do something you don't want them to. Now then, if you hit backspace, you drop back to your standard 1 cube. Now then, that was the cube. And if you press the 1 again, which if you notice on your quick bar, it actually goes to the next tool, and that's how you access the more tools that are in the subcategories. Now, it's the coffee block tool. Let me actually first switch to the second one and just put up this ramp right here. The reason why I've done this is because of when you go back to your one, you have your coffee block. What it does is it just copies the block. You have to right click to copy it, and then you left click and it pastes it. Now, if you notice, it looks like you literally just copied that block, put it right there. That's exactly what it does. And your orientation didn't change. But if you go to the next one behind that, you get the copy and paste. Which, again, you just come up, right click, you copy it. And if I turn my camera like this, click, if you notice the orientation changed. So you build up a roof, and you actually copy the roof. You can actually paste the roof onto another building, assuming you had the same size, or even just the side of the roof if you needed that. So I'm going to show you real quick. Let me increase this a bit and make it a little deeper. Drop down. Actually, we need another block higher and another block deeper. To close, you right click, and let me turn the camera around. And just like that, even though it's very awkward, we have a little bit of hallway, and as you saw, orientation came into effect. But copy and paste is a very useful tool. I advise keeping it on close hand. And the copy block tool, it only copies the block as the name suggests. So even if you copied both of these blocks together by doing that with the copy block, you obviously don't get anything, because if you notice, when you right click, it defaults to one cube, and whatever's in that cube is what it copies. So let me show you what happens. I copy that. That's what happens. You get that one block and everything that you have. So useful for a quick copy, but honestly, copy and paste is useful. A lot more useful in my opinion. Now we go back to the second category. We have the ramp, and then you have the outside corner. So let me actually come right here, build this, and let me show you the outside corner. Now, for all those that have actually been on for a little while, if you've noticed some of the roofing, it's a good word for it, right? Roofing. Now, if you notice, you do the outside corner, that's how you get a good little slanted roof like this. It's a lot better in some cases than just a flat roof, so it's whatever works. I personally like the roofing that's slanted like this, mainly because it just gives it a better look. Now then, if we go to again outside, the outside corner, you get into the inside corner. Now the inside corner looks like this. So it's useful because then you can come in with your ramp tool and actually do it like this, so that way you have this and it gives it a better look whenever you're doing a roof, if you're doing a ramp, whichever. That's how you use those tools, and those are very useful. Now, and that's actually, if you notice, all of them that are in that subcategory. Let's move on to the third one. Now then, you have the bevel tool. This looks exactly like the ramp. The only difference is with this, if let me come up here and show you. Well, that didn't work, but if you notice, orientation changed. I want to do it like this, and that's just a different way. And your ramp tool will never actually turn to the side like what it was, or like that, and it will never go upside down like this. So this is very useful for adding details because it just can give you a better look. It can give you a nice pointed edge like this, or if you had the gumption tool, you can actually just make an arrow out of it. Any kind of details you can dream up with that, just whatever works. Now we get to the next one, the rounded. It is, as it implies, it is just literally the same thing as the bevel. It's just round. So that way we come up here, we do obviously not that, because if you do the multiple blocks, your orientation is going to look like that. Now we come up here, we do this, and what you essentially make once you get all blocks placed right is actually just a single wheel or column. So if you wanted to make that and actually stand it up on its side, which I can actually do with copy and paste real quick just to show you. Copy this, stand it up on its edge. It did not actually work, so you can actually use that as a wheel or as a good base for a column. So let me stand up, go see. What it is you actually create little columns, and or actually this is a rather large column. Now, before I go too much further, I'm sure y'all notice I don't know everything about the build mode. I know enough to do some interesting details and some nice maps. I've done a few of them myself, and if you can come up with something better, honestly, go for it. I'm just showing you what I know to give you at least an idea of the basics, so that way more players, the new players, can actually come in and actually do up custom maps and upload them to the workshop. But now, let me continue. After the round, you have the column. It is a column. It's just a single block. So if you wanted a small column like this, or if you wanted a large column like that, it depends on the scale of the building you're working with and the details you have in mind. But either one works. It's all up to you. As the column, you have the sphere, and let me show you. That's all it is. But if you notice, it's an interesting little decoration if you have a column and the sphere on top of it, or even the tool that I'll show you next, or a little later. But let me get you now to the art tool. Now, again, all the tools in most categories actually focus on the orientation. That's why in some cases it doesn't really work right. In some cases it'll work out really well. But, whoops. And if you notice I went too far, Control Z. So it's useful. It's a quick undo. Undo is always useful. You can use this, and that's a very oddball combination, but it's unique nonetheless. Now, I can actually, or you can actually use these, and I'll actually show you something I've done. First, let me give you a better texture. Let me give you some gold. Now, I have to get the orientation just right for this one, but if the orientation comes out right, which that one obviously did not, some occasions this orientation does not really like me. But there, we have this. Now let me show you go back to our inside corner. And now, if you notice, it looks like a cup with no base, but that's okay because if we come to our outside corner and we get our orientation right. Orientation is a big deal with most of these tools, as I said, so you just have to kind of play with it. Switch back to our cube and finish building up our little base here. Yeah, we'll go one more level, make it look better in some cases, because now it just looks like a golden hourglass. But in essence, if you take off that bottom layer, which I'm about to do, Control Z. What's one too far? Actually, no, not far enough. But yeah, if you do that, I've seen a map that was a giant's bathroom on the workshop. So if you ever want to do like a giant's building or a giant's room, you can do this and have a giant solid gold cup for him to drink out of. And if you turn on your physics again, you can actually get inside of it. And if you do PvP, you can actually do this as a little hiding room. But on to the next tool. Otherwise, we could spend here talking days on end just about the various applications that you can use the tools for. Now, the next tool after that, let me actually switch back to, well, I'll show you, yeah, I'll show you the dark brick instead of the cobblestone. Gotta mix it up a little bit. Now, the next one is actually the arrow loop. Actually, yeah. And if you notice, I sprinted / ran. In the game, you really can't run, but in the build mode, you, since you're floating and the physics are disabled, you press shift, you run. Now, if you notice, it gives you an arrow slit. Now, and if you notice, whenever you're in the game, you press E on the arrow slits, you'll actually get pushed forward. So it's like back in the medieval times period, they had arrow slits for you to come shooting out at people, and it helps protect the archer, or in this occasion, the player, from the enemies, be it other players or actually enemies, monsters. Now then, that's the arrow slit. It's really useful whenever you're building up a nice castle, though obviously it would be a matching set. Now then, after that we have another tool which is very useful, and the texture I do not believe actually matters, but I'm going to test that out right now, see if the texture matters or not for this tool. What the tool is it's a trunk tool, and as you notice, you're placing tree trunks. Now then, let me actually move outside of that chunk, show you something else. If you click and you keep building it up, obviously you build up a taller tree. So if you want to build up a nice little tall tree and actually have manual control over it all, you can. But what I advise doing, if you're just doing little trees like this, is if you put up those, and I'm going to lock that over there, and I'll explain that in a minute. But you go into to do another auto command, or a console command more accurately. Now then, type in auto tree. Now, once again, all your console commands do not have a space in it, except for certain ones, and that's only if you have extra data to go after the command. Now, you type in auto tree, you hit enter, and as you notice, instantly, there's trees. What it does is it automatically generates the trees based on the trunks that you've placed. And as you can see, you don't have any control over it, though you can go in and delete it and re-edit some of it, like you wanted to edit this and make it match some of these other trees, you can. And as you can see, the tree is textured to be bark instead of the brick that it was. So as you can see, the texture on the trunks, it don't actually matter. And now that I've finished explaining that, I'm going to explain this. If you notice, it's locked, and all I'm doing is making it move up and down. What it is I lock motion of my placer or cursor, whatever you want to call it, into Z-axis. If you press the X, you do the same thing, but it's along the X-axis. Same thing for the Y. And if you press O, you lock the orientation. If you're looking along the Y, if you have any other axis locked, it'll lock the orientation and that axis together. Otherwise, it'll just lock the orientation if you don't have that. And you press it again, it disables it. So right now my orientation is locked. If I press it again, it goes off. If you press Shift and O, it locks all the axes, so you can't actually even move it no matter what you do. Same thing, well, a similar concept happens to the axes. I press Shift and Z, it locks it to the plane. So that way it's no longer going up and down, but it's going all over the X and Y axis. And the same thing happens if you press the X and the Y, it locks it to the plane instead of the axis. And just recently, I noticed something. If I press I've noticed this. I do not know exactly what it's doing per se, but if you press the F key, it locks the axis move, or it says fixed axis move. I'm not sure what it does because I obviously still have free range in my motion, and as I said, I don't know everything about it. So let me go ahead and disable that since I don't really know what it's doing. But now that we got the tree trunks out of the way, and a quick way to generate the tree in a forest is a really good way to add in a lot of details without a lot of time on your hands. But let me go into the next tool, which is the pyramid tool. It's really simple. It's nothing special or fancy. It's just a little pyramid, and my texture is the tree bark right now. Obviously, it affects your texture. And as you can see, it's just right now it just looks like there's a little spike in the ground. And this one, the orientation doesn't really matter because even if you look straight up underneath it, it's still going to be placed exactly the same like that. And after the pyramid, we have the bevel wall tool. And let me come over here. Well, actually, I don't have one available right now. But so let me just drop it back down right here. If you notice, it's a slanted wall. It doesn't extend completely to both sides. So that way you do up two of these right next to each other. You have that little gap. Unless you want to do that for archers, which I'm not sure if it will, any arrows will pass through that or what. But that's what it looks like. If you want a slanted part, my advice is actually to do up the bevel tool, and you do that because then you can have a slanted wall or a angled wall, if you will. But if you can figure out a good use, like I said, go for it. This is just what I know and what I'm going to tell to you, so people can use it. Now though, that I believe will about do it for this video, and I'm going to be signing off in a few minutes, and I'll get to the rest of the tools in the next video, focusing heavily on the next one and on the 6th tool. Now then, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I do hope you've learned something and hope to see your creations on the workshop. I look forward to any and all new custom maps, and I am more than willing to give them a shot. This is Demon Soul Catcher, signing off.